In terms of the way in which I look at the nature of my work as a teacher, and I don't mean to offend anybody by leaving them out, but my real concern, and where I put a great deal of my energy, is in two places. One is with generators. They're 70% of the human population. They have in many ways the easiest way of waking up. And it's so essential that generators are transformed, and I do everything in my power to try to transform generators and wake them up to their nature and their power. And it is an essential ingredient to our healthy development in the future. It's absolutely essential for us that generators wake up, and if they don't wake up, we're all in trouble. So this is one of the places where I put a great deal of my attention. The other is dealing with six-line profiles and dealing with six-line beings. You know, I am somebody who was privileged enough to recognize the specialness of these beings, to understand that they are living mutative forces, and that in fact it is deeply important for us to nurture them as much as possible so that they can go through their process in a healthy way. And that most six-line beings, because they are fragile, mutative forces are fragile, they can be easily destroyed. We've already seen evidence of illness in six-line beings, both in their first cycle and in their closing cycle when they come off the roof. So there is a great fragility there. My concern about the six-line being is that the only way that they can truly be protected is if you get to them young enough. And when I mean young enough, it doesn't have to be a child, but it certainly has to be within their first cycle. It makes things a lot easier because it's going to help them go onto the roof in a healthy way. And it's very important to see what we have seen here in the pressure of the third color and the third line, in which you must go through this how, and you have to go through this developmental process. And if you're entering into things incorrectly, and you're meeting resistance, and you're meeting frustration, and you're meeting all of those things, that you're not getting the information that you need in order to finally get to the point where you truly know who you are and live it. And six-line beings for me are the ones that in this lifetime I have to somehow, in that sense, get to them so that by the time they get to their Kiran, I'm always so happy to meet six-line beings before their Kiran. You know, by the time they get to their Kiran, that they understand what kind of pressure is there on them. Because you see, if they're not correct, it's going to be a very, very risky, dangerous, and psychologically unhealthy time for them. Because they need to be able to define within their very life force, they need to define their uniqueness and live it. They need to be their own judge and live it. After all, the sixth line carries themes of wisdom and leadership. In other words, this completion within self, the ability to live out one's pure nature, one's own nature, this is the most powerful force we're ever going to see. These are living examples. And they are powerful forces by simply being observed. Because the moment you observe them, you see the correctness. And that very observation of that correctness is an influence, and a deep influence. After all, the world is not full of six-line profiles. You know, a third of all profiles carry the sixth line. So we know that there's a huge mutative field that's at work on the planet. And as professionals, for you to see how important those two things are. And again, not at the expense of, you know, reflectors, projectors, and manifestors. I don't mean to put it in that context, but to really understand that we're under pressure now because the window's closing. And we're under pressure to have forces that are going to meet that. Now, by the way, when I say that, it's going to be what it's going to be according to what it's supposed to be. You know, but it's my job to condition you to think along those lines, that it really is important to pay attention to those themes, because how delicate the sixth line being is under the pressure of that first cycle and under the closing pressure of coming off the roof. The other thing is, do pay attention to anyone who gets to their Kiran. You know, it isn't just sixth line. Again, you can see how we all influence each other. There are major changes that are taking place in everyone's life, regardless of profile at that point. But this specific way of living it out, this specific way of becoming the role model, this is uniquely a sixth line theme. And they are the ones that are going to be the guides for the rest. They're the ones that open up the future to us. And the future is within. Truth is within. God, or the Godhead, or whatever you want to call it, is in here. And who you are is determined by yourself. It's something so important to grasp. Who you are is determined by yourself. In the end, for me, it always comes back to the same thing. All of this information is really interesting. You know? It's really interesting. But, you know, the understanding of it, the recognition of it, all of those things, it's all very nice, it's great, and everything else. But in order to be able to live out this knowledge as it applies to you personally, this is not about some intellectual grasping, because we cannot. We're not in charge. We're not going to be able to control any of that. It simply doesn't work that way. My job as a heretic is to give you a legitimate answer. But out of that legitimate answer comes your own experimentation. All I care about now is that there are human beings that are going to experiment with honoring their type and their strategy. Because out of honoring their type and their strategy, if they go through their deconditioning process, they will naturally get to that place of awakeness. They will naturally get to that place of awakeness. And that, for me, is the most important thing, and it always comes back to that. If you want to be able to recognize what your color is, live your life as yourself. You'll discover it'll be there. You won't be able to miss it. You know, it'll stand right up in your face and remind you that it's there. And it's all about you just simply being yourself. This is the way. All of the information is wonderful, and I like putting that information out because it shows the depth and solidity and logic of this knowledge. Yet for us in our work with others, you know, I make jokes about this is my job and blah, blah, blah. It's something that has deep, deep, deep meaning for me in my life every time that I can open up a little door for somebody so that they have that opportunity to begin their process. It's a very special thing. We all have that gift now. And it's so important to bring people to the basics. You know, the basics are all you got to do is live out your nature. Live out your nature, follow your strategy, honor your type, and you will get there, and you will get to see that uniqueness that's you. And that, in the end, is what it's all about. And it's what, you know, I hammer over and over and over again. You know, live out your design, follow your design, because that, in the end, is what it's all about. Like living out the nature of your profile, like living out the nature of the motivation that lies underneath, it's intended to be perfect. And it's intended to operate correctly according to who you are. And that's the whole point. You're only going to get there. You're only going to get there by living your design.